Dr. Zethara floated gracefully through the research chamber, her blue tentacles dancing in the zero gravity as she examined the latest archaeological find. The Zephyrian historian had spent 300 years studying dead civilizations, but nothing had prepared her for what lay hidden in the data cores of the derelict space station. The station had been drifting in the void for unknown centuries when the Galactic Survey Corps found it. Most of the technology was primitive by galactic standards, but the data storage systems had somehow survived. As Thara volunteered to decode the archives, expecting another routine study of a failed civilization, she began her work with the usual systematic approach. Language patterns first, then cultural markers, followed by historical records. The species called themselves humans, and their homeworld was designated Earth in their primitive databases. Standard procedure for any extinct species. But something felt wrong from the beginning. The first red flag came when she tried to understand their governmental systems. The record showed dozens of separate political entities on a single planet, all existing at the same time. This made no sense. Every civilized species unified their homeworld before developing space technology. It was a basic requirement for survival. Uthera's large black eyes blinked slowly as she processed more data. These humans had apparently reached space while still divided into competing factions. Impossible. No, species could waste resources on internal conflicts and still advance technologically. She decided the translation algorithms must be malfunctioning. The second warning sign appeared when she found references to something called military history. Her people had abandoned warfare over 10,000 years ago, along with every other intelligent species in the galaxy. Violence was an evolutionary dead end. Civilizations that couldn't move past aggression simply destroyed themselves. Yet the human records contained vast databases devoted entirely to the study of warfare, not as a cautionary tale or historical curiosity, but as an active field of research. They had universities dedicated to military strategy. They wrote textbooks about combat tactics. Zethara felt her breathing slits flutter with confusion. Maybe these humans had an unusual interest in theoretical conflict scenarios. Some species developed complex war games as mental exercises, though none took it this seriously. Then she found the casualty numbers. The first figure that made her stop was labeled World War I. The name suggested a planetary conflict, which should have meant total extinction for any species. But according to the records, this World War I killed only 17 million beings. Only 17 million. Zethara's tentacles went rigid. 17 million deaths would end her entire civilization twice over. The Zephyrian homeworld housed only 8 million souls, and that was considered a massive population by galactic standards. But the humans called this a single war, not a species-ending catastrophe. She checked the translation matrices again. The numbers remained the same. 17 million dead, and somehow the human species continued to exist afterward. Worse, the records indicated this World War I lasted only 4 years. 4 years to kill 17 million beings, and then life went on. The humans rebuilt, reproduced, and continued developing their civilization as if nothing had happened. Uthera's sleep cycle became disturbed that night. She kept running calculations, trying to understand how any species could survive such losses. Among her people, the death of even 1,000 individuals would trigger planet-wide mourning and social restructuring. 17 million deaths would mean the end of everything, but humans treated it as a temporary setback. The next day brought worse discoveries. Following the timeline, she found records of something called World War II. This conflict happened only 21 years after the first one ended. The humans had apparently learned nothing from their previous catastrophe. They simply started fighting again, this time killing 60 million of their own kind. 60 million. Zethara had to stop her research and float motionless for several hours, trying to process this information. 60 million deaths represented more beings than had ever lived on her homeworld throughout its entire recorded history. This was genocide on an unimaginable scale. Yet the human records treated World War II as just another historical event. They studied it, wrote about it, even made entertainment media depicting the conflict. They turned mass extinction into stories for their children. What kind of species creates entertainment from planetary devastation? The worst part was what came after. Instead of collapsing into barbarism or extinction, human civilization exploded forward after World War II. Their technology advanced rapidly. Their population grew. They developed nuclear weapons, space travel, and global communication systems. It was as if the massive death toll had somehow made them stronger. Gythera spent the following week diving deeper into human military records, hoping to find some explanation that would make sense. Perhaps these world wars were metaphorical. Maybe the humans used exaggerated language to describe smaller conflicts. But every piece of evidence supported the literal interpretation. The humans had actually fought planet-wide wars, killed millions of their own species, and then celebrated their survival with festivals and monuments. They built memorials to their wars. Not to mourn the tragedy of violence, but to honor the participants. They created special days to remember their conflicts and taught their children songs about military victories. The Zephyrian historian found herself unable to focus on other tasks. Her colleagues noticed her distraction during the daily research meetings. Dr. Korthal, her closest friend, expressed concern about her recent behavior. "You seem troubled, Zythara. Is the new archaeological project causing difficulties?" She couldn't explain her growing obsession with human warfare. How could she tell her peaceful colleague that she'd discovered a species that treated extinction-level conflicts as routine historical events? "The data is complex," she replied carefully. "These humans had unusual social development patterns." Korthal's tentacles swayed in understanding. Another species that failed to achieve unity before space travel. And we see that pattern occasionally. They usually destroy themselves within a few generations. But that was exactly what made the humans so disturbing. They should have destroyed themselves. Every model of civilization development predicted that species engaging in large-scale warfare would collapse within centuries. Humans had been fighting major wars for thousands of years and somehow kept getting stronger. That night, Zythara floated in her rest chamber, staring at the gentle bioluminescent patterns on her walls. Her people had evolved in peaceful oceans, developing cooperation and harmony as survival traits. Violence was literally unthinkable to them. Yet somewhere in the galaxy, there had once lived a species that turned violence into a science. They studied warfare like her people studied poetry. They perfected killing techniques like her people perfected art. And according to the most recent data fragments, these humans might still be alive. The thought kept her awake until the morning cycle began. For the first time in her 300-year life, Dr. Zythara understood what the ancient texts meant when they described nightmare visions. She had found a species that weaponized evolution itself, and she was only beginning to understand the implications. Tomorrow she would dig deeper into their records. She had to know more about these impossible beings who treated planetary warfare as a normal part of civilization, even if the knowledge cost her sleep for the rest of her life. Zythara returned to her research station the next morning with grim determination. The human data cores called to her like some terrible puzzle that demanded solving. She had to understand how a species could survive the kind of devastation that would end any civilized world. She started by examining the periods between major conflicts, hoping to find evidence of recovery time or social rebuilding. What she discovered made her question everything she knew about intelligent life. The humans didn't just recover from their wars. They thrived because of them. After each major conflict, human technology leaped forward by decades. World War I gave them advanced aviation, chemical engineering, and mass production techniques. World War II resulted in nuclear physics, rocket technology, and computer systems. It was as if warfare forced them to evolve at an accelerated pace. Zythara found records of something called the American Civil War. This internal conflict killed over 600,000 humans in just 4 years. For a single nation to lose that many beings and continue functioning was impossible by any known model of civilization. But the humans didn't just continue functioning. Their nation became stronger after the war ended. They built transcontinental transportation networks, developed industrial systems, and expanded across their entire continent. The pattern repeated throughout their history. Every major conflict resulted in social, technological, or territorial advancement. War wasn't destroying human civilization. It was driving their evolution. She discovered that humans had been fighting organized warfare for over 5,000 years. The records showed an endless series of conflicts: the Peloponnesian War, the Punic Wars, the Crusades, the Napoleonic Wars. the Mongol conquests. Each name represented death tolls that would devastate galactic civilizations. Yet humans treated them as historical footnotes. The Mongol conquest particularly disturbed her. A single human military leader named Genghis Khan had somehow organized nomadic tribes into a force that conquered most of their known world. The death toll reached 40 million beings across multiple continents, 40 million dead, and the humans considered it ancient history worth studying in schools. But the truly horrifying discovery came when she found their entertainment archives. Humans created stories about their wars. Not warnings about the dangers of violence, but thrilling adventures that glorified combat. They wrote poems about battlefield courage, songs about military victories, and tales of heroic soldiers. They turned mass death into entertainment for children. Sithara found thousands of films depicting warfare, books describing military campaigns, and games that simulated combat scenarios. Human children played with miniature soldiers, reenacting famous battles for fun. What kind of species teaches their young to celebrate violence? The research consumed her completely. She stopped attending social gatherings, ignored messages from colleagues, and spent every waking hour trying to understand human military culture. Dr. Korthal visited her research chamber during the third week of her obsession. Sithara, you've missed 7 departmental meetings. Everyone is concerned about your health. She barely looked up from the holographic displays showing human battle formations. Did you know they developed a military strategy called Total War? They deliberately targeted civilian populations to break enemy morale. Korthal's tentacles went pale. That sounds like a translation error. No species would intentionally harm non-combatants. The records are clear, Sithara replied, scrolling through documentation of strategic bombing campaigns. They called it breaking the enemy's will to fight. Entire cities destroyed to achieve military objectives. Her colleague floated backward in shock. But that would mean they deliberately killed their own kind for tactical advantage. Not just their own kind. They fought every species they encountered. I found records of humans battling everything from microscopic diseases to massive predatory animals. They didn't adapt to hostile environments. They changed the environments to suit their needs. Sithara pulled up files about human expansion across their planet. Every continent showed evidence of species extinction following human arrival. Not from accident or disease, but from direct competition. Humans had literally fought their way to the top of their world's food chain. Look at this, she said, displaying records of human hunting practices. They called it persistence hunting. They would chase prey animals for days, running them to exhaustion and death. No weapons, no technology, just endurance and determination. Korthal's breathing slits fluttered rapidly. That's predatory behavior. Intelligent species don't hunt other beings for survival. Humans do. Or rather, they did. They evolved past the need for hunting, but they kept the instinct. They turned those predatory drives into military tactics. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans approached every challenge like a military campaign. Disease became a war against germs. Natural disasters became battles against nature. Even peaceful activities like sports were. Organized competitions that simulated combat. Scenarios they had somehow retained their predatory instincts while developing advanced technology and complex societies. Sithara discovered that humans divided their military forces into specialized groups: infantry soldiers, naval forces, aerial combat units, and something terrifying called special operations. These special forces were individuals trained specifically for extreme violence in impossible situations. The records describe small teams of humans infiltrating enemy territories, surviving in hostile environments, and completing missions that should have been suicide assignments. They called themselves names like Navy SEALs, Green Berets, and Special Air Service. Each group had training programs designed to push humans beyond normal physical and mental limits. They deliberately subjected volunteers to torture, starvation, and extreme stress to create individuals capable of functioning in any situation. They weaponized their own people. Sithara, you need to rest, Korthal said gently. This research is affecting your mental health. But she couldn't stop. Each new discovery revealed another layer of human complexity that defied galactic understanding of intelligent behavior. She found records of human peace negotiations that involved explicit threats of violence. Their diplomacy included phrases like peace through strength and mutually assured destruction. They achieved stability by promising complete annihilation if attacked. Their idea of peace required the constant threat of war. Most disturbing was their relationship with death. Other species mourned their fallen and worked to prevent future casualties. Humans honored their war dead with monuments and ceremonies, but they also studied their failures to become more effective killers. They learned from death to create more death. That night, Zithara floated sleeplessly in her chamber, processing the implications of her research. She had discovered a species that treated violence as a natural part of existence. They didn't fight wars despite being civilized. They became civilized because they fought wars. Every aspect of human culture showed evidence of their warrior nature. Their literature, art, philosophy, and science all reflected a species shaped by constant conflict. They were beautiful, terrible, and completely alien to everything the galaxy considered normal. And according to the timestamp on the most recent data fragments, they were still alive somewhere among the stars. The thought terrified her more than anything she had ever imagined. 3 weeks into her research, Zithara made a discovery that shattered her understanding of natural law itself. She had been examining human agricultural records when she found something that made her question the basic principles of evolution. Humans didn't just fight other humans, they fought everything. The agricultural data revealed a species at war with nature itself. Humans battled diseases, hostile climates, predatory animals, and even the fundamental limitations of their own biology. Most species adapted to their environment over millions of years. Humans simply changed their environment to suit their immediate needs. She found records of humans living in frozen wastelands where no life should survive. Instead of evolving biological adaptations like other species, they created artificial environments, built heating systems, and wore protective clothing. They refused to let nature dictate their limitations. The medical records were even more disturbing. Humans fought microscopic enemies with the same intensity they brought to planetary warfare. They called it the war against disease, and approached it like a military campaign. When natural plagues threatened their populations, humans didn't accept them as evolutionary pressure. They developed weapons called antibiotics and vaccines. To fight biological threats that had existed for millions of years, they literally declared war on evolution itself. Zithara discovered that human children had mortality rates that should have prevented species survival. Instead of accepting this natural limitation, humans developed medical interventions that kept their young alive despite biological weaknesses. They refused to let nature select their offspring for survival traits. The more she learned, the more she realized that humans approached every aspect of existence as a conflict to be won. They didn't hunt for food like other predators. They created systematic food production that eliminated the possibility of starvation. When faced with natural disasters, they didn't migrate to safer areas like intelligent species should. They built structures designed to resist earthquakes, storms, and floods. They fought the planet itself rather than accepting its conditions, but the truly horrifying discovery came when she found their recreational activities. Humans voluntarily engaged in activities that simulated combat for entertainment. They called them sports and treated them as important cultural events. Millions of humans would gather to watch individuals fight each other in organized competitions. They had games where teams tried to invade each other's territory and capture objectives. They called it football and treated it like warfare without death. Children learned these games before they could properly walk. Even more disturbing were their individual combat sports. Humans would enter enclosed areas and fight each other until one couldn't continue. They called it boxing or martial arts and considered it artistic expression. They turned violence into art. Zithara found records of humans climbing dangerous mountains for no practical reason. They called it recreation and risked death to reach places that offered no resources or advantages. When asked why they did this, they said things like, because it's there. They sought out danger for pleasure. The military records revealed something even worse. Humans had developed warriors who specialized in surviving impossible situations. These individuals were trained to fight in any environment against any enemy, with minimal equipment. She found documentation of human soldiers surviving in jungles, deserts, Arctic regions, and urban environments while being actively hunted by enemies. They were taught to eat anything that could provide nutrition, find water in environments where it shouldn't exist, and create weapons from ordinary materials. They had turned survival itself into a weapon. The Special Forces training programs described methods that would kill most species. Humans volunteers were subjected to drowning simulations, extreme temperature exposure, sleep deprivation, and psychological torture. The purpose was to create individuals who could function effectively under any stress. They deliberately broke their own people to make them stronger. One particular military unit called Navy SEALs had a training program with an 80% failure rate. The humans who survived this training were considered elite warriors capable of operating in any environment on their planet. Water, land, air, urban areas, wilderness, Arctic conditions, tropical climates. These humans could fight effectively anywhere. Sci-Fi discovered that Special Forces soldiers were trained to kill silently, survive in hostile territory without support, and complete missions that conventional military forces couldn't attempt. They operated alone or in small groups behind enemy lines. They created individuals who were walking weapons of mass destruction. But what truly terrified her was learning that these elite warriors represented a tiny fraction of human military capability. Each major nation maintained standing armies numbering in the millions, with advanced technology and logistics systems that could deploy force anywhere on their planet within hours. Even in peacetime, humans maintained the capacity for immediate planetary warfare. She found records of something called war games, where human militaries practiced fighting each other using simulated scenarios. They treated these exercises as entertainment and invited civilian observers to watch mock battles involving thousands of soldiers. They made practice wars into public spectacles. The weapons development archives revealed a species that had systematically perfected killing technology over thousands of years, from simple tools like spears and swords to advanced systems like guided missiles and nuclear weapons. Humans didn't just develop weapons for current threats. They created arsenals designed to fight enemies that didn't exist yet. They called it technological superiority and treated weapons research as a normal part of civilization. Every human innovation seemed to have military applications. Their space program developed from rocket weapons. Their computer systems grew from military communication needs. Their medical advances came from treating battlefield injuries. They had militarized their entire technological development. Sci-Fi found herself staring at the data displays late into the night, trying to understand how such a species could exist. Her people had evolved cooperation and harmony as survival traits. Violence was literally unthinkable to them, but humans had evolved violence into an art form. They studied warfare like her people studied philosophy. They perfected killing techniques like her people perfected music. The worst realization came when she found their science fiction archives. Humans created entertainment that depicted warfare against alien species. They imagined fighting beings they had never met, in scenarios that had never occurred. They prepared for wars that didn't exist yet. Their fictional stories described humans fighting hostile aliens, malevolent artificial intelligences, interdimensional invaders, and cosmic horrors. In every scenario, humans emerged victorious through superior tactics, technology, or sheer determination. They dreamed of fighting the entire universe. Dr. Korthal found her the next morning, still floating motionless before the displays. Sci-Fi, you haven't moved in 14 hours. This obsession is destroying your health. She turned to face her colleague with large, haunted eyes. Did you know that humans created individuals trained specifically to infiltrate enemy societies and gather intelligence? They call them spies and secret agents, and that's impossible. No civilized species would deliberately deceive others. Humans don't just deceive their enemies. They lie to their own people when they think it's necessary. They call it national security and classified information. Entire human governments operated secret programs that their own citizens didn't know existed. Korthal's tentacles trembled. You're describing a species of sociopaths. No, Sithara said quietly. I'm describing a species that weaponized everything, including truth itself. They turned deception into a tool of survival. The implications were staggering. Humans had developed beyond simple violence into systematic approaches to conflict that encompassed every aspect of their civilization. They were still out there somewhere, carrying their warrior culture into the galaxy. and nobody knew they were coming. The discovery that changed everything came during Zythara's 4th week of research. She had been cross-referencing timeline data when she noticed something that made her breathing slits freeze completely. The most recent entries in the human database were dated only 300 years. So 300 years was nothing in galactic terms. Species that achieved interstellar travel typically left technological signatures for thousands of years after extinction. 300 years meant the humans might still be alive. Worse, the final database entries contained references to interstellar colonization projects and deep space exploration missions. The humans had achieved space travel while still maintaining their warrior culture. Zythara's tentacles went rigid as she processed this information. Every civilized species abandoned warfare before developing interstellar technology. Violence and space travel were incompatible concepts. Aggressive species destroyed themselves during the technological transition period, but humans had apparently carried their military traditions directly into space. Shachi found fragmented records of something called the Space Force and Colonial Defense networks. Even after leaving their homeworld, humans maintained military organizations designed for combat in vacuum environments. They had weaponized space itself. The implications terrified her. A species that treated planetary warfare as routine historical events was now loose in the galaxy. They could be anywhere, spreading their violent culture to other star systems. She began searching the galactic communication networks for any signs of human contact. The results made her wish she had never started this research. There were reports scattered across the Outer Rim territories. Survey teams had detected artificial signals that didn't match any known galactic species. The signals used mathematical progression patterns and electromagnetic frequencies that suggested advanced technology. Most disturbing, several exploration vessels had reported contact with unidentified ships that refused standard diplomatic protocols. These unknown vessels maintained defensive positions and demanded territorial identification before allowing approach. They were already acting like military units. Zythara found a classified report from the Galactic Survey Corps describing an encounter with an unknown vessel near the Centauri system. The alien ship had responded to peaceful contact attempts with what the report called aggressive defensive posturing. When the survey team tried to establish standard diplomatic communications, the unknown vessel had apparently transmitted a message that translated roughly as, "Identify yourself and state your intentions," not greetings or welcome like civilized species used. A military challenge. The humans were out there and they were still thinking like warriors. She discovered more evidence in the archaeological reports from frontier worlds. Several planetary surveys had found artificial structures that didn't match known architectural patterns. The buildings showed evidence of defensive planning, with multiple exit routes, reinforced construction, and strategic positioning. Humans were building fortifications on alien worlds. The thought of first contact with such a species made Zythara physically ill. How could the galaxy prepare for diplomatic relations with beings who turned everything into a potential battlefield? She found records of human diplomatic history that provided no comfort. Human peace negotiations typically involved explicit discussions of military capabilities, territorial boundaries, and mutual defense agreements. They approached diplomacy like warfare by other means. Even their peaceful treaties included detailed provisions for what would happen if the agreements failed. They planned for diplomatic failure before they planned for diplomatic success. Their concept of trust included preparation for betrayal. But the most disturbing discovery came when she found human entertainment from their spacefaring period. They created fictional stories about meeting alien species, and every single narrative involved either military conflict or the threat of military conflict. Humans couldn't even imagine peaceful first contact scenarios. Their stories depicted aliens as either potential enemies to be fought or potential allies to be recruited for fighting other enemies. Even in their fantasy scenarios, humans approached galactic civilization as a military problem to be solved. They dreamed of galactic warfare. Zythara began having what her people called stress visions, involuntary, mental images of possible futures. She saw human warships arriving at peaceful worlds demanding submission or alliance. She imagined human colonies spreading across the galaxy, each one a potential military base. The humans wouldn't just join galactic civilization, they would militarize it. Dr. Korthal found her in a state of complete breakdown during the 5th week. Zithara, you must stop this research. You haven't eaten, slept, or left this chamber for days. She turned to her colleague with wild, haunted eyes. They're still alive, Korthal. The humans are still alive, and they're coming. What do you mean, coming? They achieved interstellar travel 300 years ago. They're expanding into the galaxy right now, probably establishing colonies and military outposts. Everything I've studied suggests they're already out there. Korthal's tentacles went pale. But surely the Galactic Council would have detected a new spacefaring species. Not if they don't want to be detected. Humans developed military stealth technology. They can hide their presence until they're ready to reveal themselves. The thought chilled her to her core. Humans had perfected deception, infiltration, and strategic planning over thousands of years of warfare. If they wanted to enter the galaxy secretly, they probably could. They might already be here. Listen to me, Zithara said urgently. Humans don't just fight wars. They plan wars. They think strategically about every possible conflict scenario. If they're entering galactic space, they've already analyzed every species, every government, every potential threat and opportunity. She pulled up the human strategic planning documents she had discovered. Look at this. They call it intelligence gathering and threat assessment. Before humans engage in any conflict, they study their enemies for years. They learn weaknesses, capabilities, and behavioral patterns. Korthal studied the displays with growing horror. You're suggesting they might be studying us right now? I'm saying they definitely are. Humans don't make contact until they understand exactly what they're dealing with. They're probably watching galactic civilization, learning our languages, analyzing our military capabilities, and planning for every possible scenario. The idea of being secretly observed by human intelligence operations made both researchers unconsciously look around their chamber. But why haven't they made formal contact? Korthal asked. Because they're still deciding whether we're enemies, allies, or resources to be exploited. Humans don't trust anyone until they've established mutual defense agreements or confirmed tactical superiority. Zithara realized that everything the galaxy considered normal diplomatic behavior would seem suspicious to human military thinking. Peaceful species that welcomed strangers without defenses would appear vulnerable and naive. Humans would interpret galactic hospitality as strategic weakness. We have to warn the Council, she said suddenly. They need to understand what's coming. When humans finally reveal themselves, they won't be seeking peaceful coexistence. They'll be negotiating from a position of strategic advantage. But as she began composing her report, Zithara realized the terrible irony of her situation. To warn the galaxy about human military thinking, she would have to convince peaceful species to start thinking like warriors themselves. The humans were going to change everything, whether they meant to or not, and the galaxy was completely unprepared for what was coming. As Zithara floated before the holographic display that would transmit her findings to the Galactic Council, her tentacles trembling with exhaustion and terror. 5 weeks of research had transformed her from a respected historian into something her people didn't have words for, a being haunted by the knowledge of inevitable war. She had prepared a comprehensive report, but how could she explain the inexplicable? How could she make peaceful species understand the threat posed by beings who treated violence as a natural part of existence? The preliminary data burst would reach the Council within hours. After that, there would be no taking back what she had learned. Council members, she began recording. I have completed analysis of the human archaeological data, and I must report findings that threaten the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. She paused, struggling to find words that could convey the magnitude of her discovery. Humans are not extinct. Based on timeline analysis and technological progression indicators, they achieved interstellar travel approximately 3 centuries ago and are currently expanding into galactic space. This expansion represents an existential threat to all peaceful civilizations. The recording felt inadequate. How could she compress 5 weeks of horror into a brief report? Humans do not fight wars, she continued. They are war. Every aspect of their civilization has been shaped by constant conflict. They have spent thousands of years perfecting violence into science, art, and philosophy. They approach every challenge as a military problem requiring tactical solutions. She activated the data display showing human casualty figures from major conflicts. 2, Provide context for council review. Human local conflicts routinely produce casualty numbers that would represent complete extinction for any galactic species. Their World War II killed 60 million beings in 6 years. This was not a species-ending catastrophe for humans. It was Tuesday. The numbers scrolled past, each figure representing death tolls that would devastate entire star systems. Humans do not distinguish between military and civilian applications of technology. Every innovation serves dual purposes: advancing civilization and improving warfare capabilities. Their space program developed from weapons research. Their medical advances grew from battlefield trauma treatment. Their communication systems originated from military command requirements. CO pulled up examples of human special forces training programs. They deliberately create individuals capable of surviving and fighting in any environment. These special operations personnel are trained to function as self-contained military units behind enemy lines. A single human special forces soldier represents more combat capability than most species' entire defensive forces. The thought of humans applying their military expertise to galactic exploration made her breathing slits flutter in panic. Most critically, humans have developed strategic thinking that encompasses scenarios we cannot imagine. They plan for conflicts that do not exist. They prepare for enemies they have never met. They create contingency plans for warfare against hypothetical opponents across multiple star systems. She activated her most disturbing discovery: human science fiction archives depicting interstellar warfare. Their entertainment media reveals a species that dreams of galactic conquest. They create stories about fighting alien empires, hostile artificial intelligences, and cosmic threats. In every scenario, humans emerge victorious through superior tactics, technology, or determination. The implications were staggering. Humans weren't just prepared for galactic warfare, they were looking forward to it. Current intelligence suggests humans are already operating in galactic space using stealth protocols. Unidentified vessels have been detected in frontier regions, maintaining defensive positions and demanding territorial identification from survey teams. These contacts indicate humans are conducting reconnaissance operations to assess galactic military capabilities. She paused the recording to compose herself. The next part would be the hardest to explain. Council members must understand. Humans do not seek peaceful coexistence. They seek strategic advantage. When they finally reveal themselves through official diplomatic channels, it will be because they have already achieved tactical superiority. The evidence supported this conclusion. Humans never entered conflicts without overwhelming advantages or detailed intelligence about their opponents. Human diplomatic history shows a species that approaches negotiations as warfare by other means. Their peace treaties include explicit military provisions, territorial guarantees, and mutual defense requirements. They do not trust agreements that lack enforcement mechanisms. She activated the final displays showing human military doctrine. Humans believe that peace requires the constant threat of war. Their diplomatic philosophy includes concepts like peace through strength and mutually assured destruction. They achieve stability by promising total annihilation if attacked. The recording was becoming too long, but she couldn't summarize the essential points without losing critical context. Immediate recommendations for council consideration. First, establish emergency protocols for contact with human vessels. Standard diplomatic approaches will be interpreted as strategic weakness. Humans respect only demonstrated capability and clear territorial boundaries. She pulled up her analysis of human first contact scenarios. Second, begin military capability assessments for all member species. Humans will evaluate every galactic civilization as either potential allies, enemies, or resources to be exploited. We must be prepared to demonstrate defensive capabilities or accept subordinate status. The words felt wrong coming from her peaceful people, but human strategic thinking demanded such preparations. Third, understand that human peaceful intentions will include military components. They consider armed vessels and defensive installations normal aspects of civilization. Their peace proposals will sound like occupation plans to species unfamiliar with military thinking. She realized she was describing the end of galactic civilization as they knew it. Humans wouldn't destroy peaceful societies, but they would fundamentally change them. Final analysis. Humans represent a paradigm shift that will affect every aspect of galactic civilization. They will militarize space travel, fortify peaceful worlds, and introduce competitive thinking to cooperative societies. This transformation is inevitable because humans cannot conceive of existence without strategic considerations. The recording was complete, but Zithara felt compelled to add a personal note. I have spent my career studying dead civilizations, trying to understand why intelligent species fail to survive. After 5 weeks of researching human culture, I finally understand the answer. Most species are not equipped for survival in a universe that contains humans. She transmitted the data burst and immediately began working on detailed appendices. The Council would need specific examples, tactical analyses, and strategic recommendations. They would demand proof that such a species could actually exist. But even as she compiled evidence, Zithara knew her warnings would arrive too late. Humans had been active in galactic space for 3 centuries. They had already assessed every species, every government, every potential threat and opportunity. When they finally revealed themselves, it would be on their terms according to their timeline. With complete strategic advantage, the galaxy was about to learn what humans meant by peaceful contact. 3 days later, her personal communicator received a priority message from the Galactic Survey Corps. Unknown vessels had appeared simultaneously in 17 different star systems, transmitting identical messages in perfect galactic standard language. Greetings from the United Human Federation. We come in peace and request formal diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council. We have established temporary embassy facilities in neutral space and await your response. Zithara read the message with growing dread. It was perfectly polite, diplomatically appropriate, and strategically positioned to demonstrate overwhelming tactical capabilities. 17 simultaneous appearances meant humans had been watching galactic civilization for decades, learning languages, studying diplomatic protocols, and positioning assets throughout known space. They had achieved complete strategic surprise while maintaining plausible peaceful intentions. It was the most perfectly executed first contact scenario in galactic history, and it proved everything she had warned about. The humans had arrived, and they were still thinking like warriors. The galaxy would never be the same.